Have you ever heard of PHOGS? Chances are you might not have done so yet. Walking amongst one of the video game trade shows here in the UK, I looked amongst the sea of gritty first-person shooters, expansive world-determining RPGs, and tons of games set amongst the stars to see a little area that was chock full of, well, colour. The tiny PHOGS demo stand lit the area around it like many a booth on the show floor didn't. PHOGS didn't surround itself with greys, blacks and browns, but instead a cute double-ended dog and more colour than you'd find in a bag of Skittles. For episode 2 of Pause Regime Presents, I spoke to the team behind this colourful indie title, Bitloom Games, in order to find out more about the game, their journey, and how you actually become a game developer. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and give us a 5-star rating with a comment in order to help us grow and allow us to continue making shows like the one you're about to listen to. So I've got James, Henry and Douglas in the room. First question, how do we pronounce it? Because I want to be sure on this.
PHOGS.
PHOGS.
PHOGS, yeah.
It's physics dogs.
Oh, is that what it stands for?
That's how we came up with the name anyway, yeah.
Right. I had no idea that that's what it stood for, actually. Now it all makes sense. I don't know who wants to answer this question. Maybe all three of you can chime in here, but why did you guys decide to make video games and not do something more boring?
It's quite an interesting question.
Well, the main thing that led me to video games was I couldn't really decide whether I wanted to do something technical or something creative. And I was right at the end of school trying to work out what should I do for a degree, leaning towards art, and then discovered programming, game development, and everything in between that is just this amazing way to kind of do creative things with maths and computers. And I mean, I spent all my life playing games, so it seemed like a really great way to use what I enjoyed to do something that could lead to a career and also lead to something that I found really, really interesting.
Yeah, pretty much the same kind of thing. I've always loved games and played games a whole bunch. And I actually didn't go straight to uni after finishing school. I worked as a graphic designer for a little bit and found the work, the actual practical side interesting, but just the actual kind of subject matter, I was always kind of wished I was doing more silly or interesting or fantastical things. So I kind of just realized, I could just be doing this kind of stuff, but in an industry that I'm really interested in. So I went and kind of studied for more game-oriented skills.
Yeah, I think honestly, I kind of put the thought together in my head as a kid that games just don't sort of spring up out of the ground, and the big role of names at the end of all the games that I played are actually tied to real people that actually make games. I realized, that's what I want to do then, and I just sort of went for that realization that I can actually just make games, and that can be my job.
I think it's probably quite a few percentage of the population doing it, so it's in your head, it's that's never a thing that I could do, but then just realizing someone's got to do it, so may as well give it a shot.
You might as well. I think it's quite interesting because obviously back in the day, I don't know about you guys, but I kind of grew up on Master System, Mega Drive and sort of games like that, and you'd get to the credits and the credits would be pretty small, but yet a lot of the bigger games these days, the credits are rolling for 20 minutes, half an hour, and you haven't got time to just make a cup of tea but also have dinner and probably have pudding as well.
It's such a different world in terms of how games are made, and definitely nowadays it seems like a daunting task. You need a few hundred people just to make something small.
But it's not true.
It's not true, but that's what it seems like.
So bearing in mind that we're obviously an audio podcast, I don't know who wants to have a shot of this, but can you try and explain to someone who doesn't know what your game is, what exactly it is and also how it looks? Well,
I could try and explain what it is, and maybe Doug, who's our artist, can explain what it looks like. So PHOGS is a game about a double-ended dog. So it's this long, gelatinous, wobbly cartoon dog with a head at either end, and you're thrown into this world full of strange creatures and puzzles to solve. And each person grabs either side of a controller or a controller each and controls one dog, and they work together, navigating through this world, going on adventures and meeting all these strange inhabitants of the world.
Kind of like a very fundamentally cooperative puzzle game at its core, but trying to mix in as much kind of silliness and whimsy and fun moments as possible. And visually it's very like kind of playing off the character, just very cartoony and bright and hopefully like somewhat fantastical.
The actual art style I wanted to touch on just a little bit, because for me, when I was, for example, walking around EGX and I was looking at all the games, your game, despite not having kind of the biggest kind of stand or show presence, really stuck out in amongst, I guess, the kind of greys and blacks and browns that you see for a lot of video games. I mean, was there any inspiration? Did anything inspire you behind the art style? Because for me, as someone who, I'll be honest, I don't know too much about art, but it was very striking. It kind of stood out to me. So what was behind the thinking of the style?
I think we wanted something that was, as you know, we had this character that was really strange and really like wacky, and we really wanted the art to reflect that. And I think like going down the like avenue of just like sort of really bright colors, and you know, Doug, who's great at making these like really sort of cool creatures and stuff like that, all kind of tie into how this like we want to present this like what is ultimately just like a fun wacky thing that
I think it's like finding a world that the PHOGS make sense in, because like putting them in like a fairly realistic setting would probably be fairly horrific. So like trying to like put them in a setting around other like just super weird silly stuff that kind of like makes them make sense and just kind of like fits together. And I think also, to a degree, the like art style itself, in terms of like how the visuals, like I definitely wanted to keep it fairly simple because I am like one artist on the team. So to some element, it is inspired by just like practically how can I like get this put together and still look like a fairly like finished, polished thing. Yeah, my style's always been fairly like colourful and blocky and like simple and just kind of like exaggerating that as much as I can.
My mind currently thinking of what it would look like if it was real. If it was a real thing.
I'm sure maybe one day someone will do a horrible photorealistic render of a fog to go alongside all the like Bart Simpsons.
do like a Skyrim mod or something like that. Just drop it in there.
Oh, we have to do a Skyrim mod.
CS:GO, shall we?
We do love really colourful things, and like a lot of the games we play, cartoons, and just generally that's something that appeals to us a lot. And so when we see games and they're all grey and dark, we really want to be filling this kind of niche in independent 3D games, trying to make something that's really colourful and vibrant. That there are other games that have done that, and we want to add. And yeah, we just want to see more games like that, which are about having fun with your friends rather than necessarily about being in a gritty, dark world.
Yeah, so many video games that's where they start, the dark, gritty world. I want to talk a little bit about how PHOGS came to be, because obviously it's not just a case that you guys met up one day and went, let's make a game about a double-ended dog. So what's the origins behind, I guess, you guys as a team and PHOGS itself?
Yeah, so we all knew each other through university, and we came together through game jams and stuff like that were hosted there. And we sort of knew from working together like that we wanted to make a go of it and try and set up a little studio and make something cool. So we, subsequently locked ourselves in a way too hot little room in the uni until like PHOGS came out.
We called the oven.
We went through like a lot of things to kind of reach this this final idea. And I think one of the big things is that we had the idea of like a kind of gelatinous wobbly character for quite a while. It was kind of like our stepping off point, but we had like loads of different ways that the game could have gone, and like we were close to taking it in a direction that would have basically just been the same as something like Push Me Pull You or Sausage Sports Club or something like that, something where it's like more about the minigame madness type stuff, whereas we decided that it would be more interesting to take it in the direction of a puzzle game and try and think about like how can we use this like kind of weird character that we've come up with as a puzzle interaction rather than as just like a sort of sports game interaction.
It's definitely like evolved and kind of like shaped itself as it's gone. Like a while ago it wasn't like set in stone necessarily, but like I think the core has always been the character, just the idea of this like two players literally like tied together as one kind of entity and having to work together, and how that changes the nature of the cooperation in the game. Because I think there's a lot of like really awesome cooperative puzzle games out there, but I find sometimes they do fall into the trap of like you're just both doing the same thing, just like you could basically be independent, and there's not really that like force, like kind of like having to actually communicate and think together and like synchronize your actions fully. So we just wanted to see how that would work in a game and how fun it would end up being.
A lot of what we'd worked on before PHOGS, we tried like a lot of different ideas and made like a huge number of games, but one of the things that linked most of them is that they were 3D. And so we knew that we wanted to make something 3D, and Doug's art really shines in 3D. You can see that in the creatures in PHOGS, like how much character they have. And so I think that was another factor of how we came to the idea, was just we knew that we wanted something 3D, we knew we wanted something cooperative, and the fog is like this perfect balance between like a really nice 3D character that works with physics. It can kind of flop around and have a lot of gameplay that we wouldn't expect, which is exciting for us as developers, seeing someone do something you'd never expect with the character. And then just this idea of playing together, like Doug said, you are tied together. So it kind of encourages this cooperation. Something we see all the time when we're demoing the game is people who at first are quite tentative or really have never played games, because you're kind of helping each other inherently, you really start to like get this kind of cooperation emerging. It's really exciting just to see that, and I think that really encouraged us. When we saw that early on, we knew that this idea was the right one over any of the others that we'd come up with, compared to some of the competitive ones that Henry was talking about.
Hey, are you enjoying the show and want to hear more from Pause Resume? Well, luckily enough for you, we host a podcast twice a month called The Pause Resume Show, hosted by me, Alexandra. On the show, the Pause Resume team get together and discuss the latest news and releases in the world of video games, and usually end up talking about other video game related nonsense as well, because, well, why not? In order to listen, make sure you search for The Pause Resume Show, a gaming podcast, on your podcast service of choice, and make sure you're subscribed. Doing so means you won't only get Pause Resume Presents, but also The Pause Resume Show, all in one feed, so there's no reason not to.
What were the main sort of challenges and difficulties that you guys have faced in getting this running, I guess, to start with, and then eventually when it releases to actually making it a fully finished product?
I think that early on, a lot of the trouble was actually for us as designers. We'd made this character, but we didn't really know what world it fit into and how the puzzle should work. And so we went through a few iterations of kind of how the players were interacting with the world, and something that we came upon quite quickly was the idea of kind of having you go around solving puzzles, grabbing things, dragging them, doing things independently. And that early process took a while, and there were a lot of times when we demoed the game and people wouldn't really know what to do. They'd be quite confused, and we'd go back to the drawing board and say, okay, maybe if we had it work like this, or even things as simple as how you grab in the world, how you bite onto things as the dog. We went through quite a few iterations of how that works and what button presses and combinations you have to do.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was a lot of the challenge was us like trying to find the like identity of the game, like what kind of game actually was it, and like what things are you doing from moment to moment. It definitely like took us a while to settle into like what it has become now, and we just like tried so many different ideas and we have like so many different like things that we implemented that like just felt a bit weird and didn't quite like match up to the character and the kind of game that we were, you know, wanting to create.
I think like another thing is possibly like difficulty, like trying to place how tricky certain stuff could be, because I think obviously like at face value a lot of people are like, oh, this is like a kid's game, right? And I think in our heads it's not necessarily strictly for kids. It's like we want but we do want to make it as many people as possible can enjoy it. So I think like just the cooperative stuff obviously lends itself to like family kind of play really well. So we definitely don't want to lock it off in terms of difficulty or like precision controls. So like a lot of finding the balance there in terms of like making sure the difficulty curve ramps up in a like nice enough way that like younger kids or like adults can enjoy it like equally.
Is it ultimately quite difficult weighing that kind of difficulty between, you know, making it easy and approachable, but then ramping it up a little bit for maybe the players who maybe expect a little bit more? Is that like at the forefront of your mind when you're creating this game?
I think a lot of our process so far has been more about how can we make it surprising and delightful, as long as we keep coming back to over and over again. So a lot of games, obviously, the difficulty is what rewards you. When you solve a really hard puzzle, you're like, that was amazing. And we do have moments like that where you come against a puzzle and you got to like sit and solve it and think about how the different parts work together. And you can see that in the demo. There's this instance of these creatures are eating things, but you need those things because they bounce you over a gap. And so you've got to lure the creatures away, and you really have to like sit and think, and it's not easy. But I think that surprise elsewhere of these funny things that happen in the world and the way the physics works, and just the general kind of theme of the game is definitely more focused on how can we surprise the player rather than how can we give them a really difficult puzzle. And something that we've tried to do is use kind of secrets in the levels to add that difficulty, because we know that players who go through the levels, if they do find it too easy or maybe too kind of short, then we have these secrets that are a bit trickier. They require a bit more dexterity and cooperation. And so having those secrets allows us to, you know, find the balance in the main path and then go a bit wild with these extra bits that we don't need to worry too much about someone missing or having a bit of a hard time, because it's extra and they can always come back to it if they want.
Yeah, I think as well we want the difficulty to come from the cooperation rather than or like the problem solving rather than your ability to execute it. We've gone through various iterations where you have to make some precision, like landing on a platform after jumping on something, and like it just didn't feel good with the system that we've got, because it's like this weird
unwieldy,
unwieldy, you know, controlled by two people at once character. So we always try and consider like how is this thing that you're doing going to be cooperative in some way. And I think like an example of that is in our demo. We have a section where you have to climb up a hill, but there's intermittent wind blowing down it that will push you back to the bottom. So you have to work together to grab onto these posts and like anchor yourself so that you can move your way further up the hill. And that kind of moment is what we're looking for. Like it's not a hard thing to execute, but you need to work together in order to execute it. And that's like where we want the difficulty to come from there.
And even if you're playing that on your own, there's still this challenge of cooperating with yourself where you've got to try and kind of make the right motions, and it works really well when we get that right, and that's what we want to aim for.
Yes, it's interesting you actually mentioned about the going up the hill with the wind on the demo, because I actually remember that quite well actually, and I remember it gave me a little bit of kind of like the instant gratification that a lot of puzzle games sort of strive to do, and it's almost like that aha moment for the player where then they keep going on because they want more of those kind of yes, I know what I'm doing sort of moments. So I think in the demo, at least, I think you guys have definitely done that quite well, which brings me on to another question actually. Apart from building and working on a game in a room that you've nicknamed the Oven, what advice would you give to kind of the next sort of generation of developers, maybe people listening to the show thinking, you know, I'd like to create a game one day?
I think my main piece of advice is it's really easy to try and make a game that you want to play. And a lot of people get caught up in, you know, making these huge RPGs because that's what they enjoy playing. But I think something that is a much better way to approach learning about game design and game development is actually just make something that either you don't really enjoy and how can you make that good? Or just make something that is like this tiny little idea that you've got that you've never seen anyone do before. Because I think a lot of people who start game development, they get disheartened because they're trying to remake some of the games they love, and those games have been made by huge teams. If instead they approach it from, how can I, using what I know or what I'm learning, make something really, really small or something that I've never seen before, and just focus on that and slowly build up. And then when you do have like those skills and you've made a few games, then you can start to approach these larger ideas, but you'll probably do it in a way more interesting way because you're not just trying to mimic what other people have done, you're trying to do something in your own style and in your own way. There are a lot of tools and engines. I mean, we use Unity, and there are other things that really require you to know programming and have like a real grasp.
If you've got any questions, then email us, show@pausresume.com, or get in touch with us on social media. Just search for Pause Resume and you'll find us there. Pause Resume Presents will be back on the first Monday of June with another guest, so stay tuned.